But listen, I want to
No.
just kind of open it up and get a little bit of your background and your experience here and why this is an important topic for you.
Well, where do I start? So I'm a junior in college right now, which I mean, I know I look much older, but I get that all the time. But I'm a junior in college right now. And I, so I first experienced something with the subject matter when I was a freshman in college. I always was someone who had his eyes on the sky, his head in the clouds, so to speak, very idealistic kind of lad. And that idealism drove me directly to get involved in collegiate debate. And because I have a passion for ideas, and that's why I study philosophy. Even though it can be very dense and hard sometimes, it's worth it when you really get down to the end of it. In fact, I mean, I was actually reading Kierkegaard a few days ago, and just how he conceptualized everything from faith, and it just made me smile. It made me realize that there's a lot in this world that is not immediately apparent to us in our initial perceptions, that we actually can grasp if we actually take up time to delve into the minds of some of the greatest thinkers in the world, or even some people who are not considered the greatest thinkers but may have valuable thoughts anyway. And so that's what drove me, and that drove me to collegiate debate. I had no clue the nexus of leftism in academic, like academic slavishness that I was entering. Like, seriously, to this day I am still thunderstruck by what I experienced. And so the first day I walked into the debate coach's office, I said, well, I like Kant, I like Ayn Rand. And he's like, Ayn Rand? And his eyes just went wide. I'm like, is that something bad? But he said, you're a very smart lad. You can be on the team. So I thought, you know what? He just has something against Ayn Rand. That's fine. I don't agree with it. That's fine. I mean, all thinkers have their flaws, and that's okay. And you can have something against people, I guess. But I didn't know that moment actually conveyed to me the sense of the entire team and what I would experience for a good majority of my duration there. So when I went to my first debating championship, the first debating tournament, my partner actually bailed on me. Debating is a team effort. He bailed on me, and so I went there, and it was in Valdosta, Georgia, and I did the entire tournament. I'm not trying to brag or anything. I'm just telling you what happened. I won the entire tournament by myself, but the topics that were at the tournament, thank you. The topics at the tournament were kind of very disturbing. They were like, oh, should we endorse the Black Panthers 12-point plan to further the Black community, or should we do this or that? And regardless of what side one was on, you would hear leftist arguments. You would hear arguments mired in critical race theory. So when I got back from that tournament, I talked to one of my other coaches. I'm like, dude, these arguments are a little bit too identitarian for me. They're a little bit too collectivist for me. I'm not sure I can handle this, in good faith. I'm not sure I can argue these things. And we actually spent 7 hours arguing about this. One of the student coaches about me being involved in a case that would postulate a critical theory idea called the state of exception, which basically, for your listeners, if they're not aware, it's basically a theory made by Carl Schmitt, who was a Nazi jurist, and that came out through the ages to go towards Giorgio Agamben, who is an Italian academic who follows Foucault, is a Foucaultian scholar. And it basically says that the sovereign has the ability to suspend power, the sovereign being a president, a politician, to suspend power and assume control over life and the processes of life and create a state of exception to the rule of law. And I didn't feel comfortable arguing this idea because it was mired in Foucaultian theory. It was mired in seeing everything in society as a mixture of power dynamics and privilege and stations, and I didn't feel comfortable arguing that. So we argued for all these hours, like, well, Christian, this happens. I'm like, you think it happens because you're divining this thing into reality. But in all reality, a process like this does occur, but it occurs in a different way. And that's when I really found the issue with critical race theory. It reduces everything to a single quality. And when you do that, you're being fundamentally unscientific, unphilosophical. You are just doing everything in the book that is incorrect if you're trying to actually get to a point of genuine knowledge production. And I kept going up against these arguments simply. And I actually lost a lot of tournaments because I wouldn't kowtow to this leftist critical race theory stuff. And a lot of people on the team actually ran cases that were inherently tied to their identity and their identity's relation to power. So, for example, there was a team on the debate team that ran a black feminism case. Well, we're being modified because stores give us beauty products for our hair, and we're being treated as if we're commodities. well, is it possible that maybe a lot of black women or a lot of women in general like hair supplies, and therefore a store tries to cultivate a market? Is that possible? I mean, does it have to be something? Is that apparently not. Apparently, everything has to be about this power and privilege falsehood. And there was a case that ran. There were two LGBTQ folks on the team. I'm LGBTQ as well. I'm gay, but they were running a simple kind of case. Well, we're gay and we're trans, and this color is how I interact with all of society, and therefore you need to affirm my identity by giving me the ballot, by giving me a yes vote. But seriously, this kind of stuff, and
they would actually argue that they would actually argue that their identity needed to be affirmed through a yes vote.
Yes. Oh yeah.
Wow.
That actually. And the thing is, well, there was actually one time in McKendree, Illinois. This is my last tournament, actually. There was one time where a judge, and all judges typically are very leftist themselves. The judge was like, look, you guys put me in a very difficult situation, because it was the ones who wanted their identities to be affirmed by a yes vote, and there was a case about disability rights and how disabled people are apparently oppressed. And so she's like, you know what? I care very deeply about these demographics, and you're putting me in a very precarious position by doing this, and I feel so bad right now. I'm thinking to myself, lady, you are not supposed to be so materially invested into you're supposed to make a detached, impartial judgment on the basis of arguments, whether they're true or false, whether they're presented good or not. But instead, you have immersed yourself into these individuals' personal lives because they have presented it, and you are now making yourself feel bad about this. This is the mindset. This is the framework of collegiate debate, most unfortunately. And so I would run libertarian conservative cases. I'd be quoting William F. Buckley or Robert George or some other conservative intellectual, because that's just who I am. I am someone, I'm a very I adhere to tradition when the tradition helps me in my own life. But now, if it doesn't help me in my own life, I move beyond it, which is why I call myself a conservatarian, because I do recognize that liberty plays a very big role in that. But they couldn't handle those arguments, or they didn't like those arguments, and so I was referred to in a lot of ways in silence by my debating peers with a lot of very disparaging remarks. So let me give you an example. One time we were prepping as a team. We had ordered fried chicken and everything. I love fried chicken personally. It's excellent.
Definitely like fried chicken.
Prepping as a team. Yeah. It's really excellent. As a team, and we were in a library room. And the conversation of systemic racism came up. Personally, I'm just going to give my views here. You probably can divine them. I don't think that claims of systemic racism that many people are making, that many academics are making, are as widespread and deep-rooted into the American system as folks think. I think individual racism certainly prevails. It exists in many areas. But is the entire system, from everything from hospitals to homelanders to police to judges, are all of them all participating in this what leftists would call this curse of whiteness? No. And to say so is to itself engage in a racist, collectivistic idea of what that stuff is. And that's disgusting. But we got into a conversation about that. And I said, look, can you produce material evidence of this systemic racism? Can you tell me how these systems hold you down materially in your life? One of them said to me, you know what, Christian, I won't repeat the exact word he said. When you walk off this campus, those police, they see you as an N-word, and he's black himself. They see you as an N-word. Yeah, they see you as that, and to them, you're just an N-word. So no matter how much I stick up to them, you are simply an N-word. I'm like, okay, dude, you can keep trying to claim things about me that are not true, but I follow that divine adage that Ralph Waldo Emerson said in Self-Reliance, that I have to toil on my own plot of land, that I am a unique individual, and I will let that come forth. I will not be bound to a historical perception of me that existed a very long time ago in material forms. I will make my own destiny. I will manifest my own destiny, whether you like it or not. And what they do about that? They didn't like that, because I didn't buy into the victim class idea. Mm-hmm. And so this was near the beginning of the end of my time in collegiate debate. I was just being assailed by all these very pernicious ideas, and they're pretty, like, these are academics. They're not smart ideas, but they're pretty elaborate. They're pretty systematized. So, like, for example, there's an idea called Afro-pessimism, in which all things in society are critiqued through the lens of what an African is supposed to think. oh, colonialism, oh, this, oh, that. And these are just extended throughout time to mean something about contemporary events. This is something that many critical theorists like to do all the time.
So let me ask you a question about that, because I just want to make sure I understand. So there is a standard definition of what an African should think about an issue, and how was that definition developed?
Yeah, absolutely. No, yes, there is. Yeah, of course. And look, when you operate in critical race theory terms, you don't really have, the individual does not exist. You exist as a class, as a certain demographic. So yes, there is a certain idea of how people are supposed to think if they're not participating in white supremacy, so to speak. I mean, I saw Cornel West, the famous academic, leftist academic, say a few days ago that oh yes, I mean, women can participate in patriarchy and white supremacy. They do it all the time. And I'm like, huh? I was like, how do you qualify that, Cornell? I mean, he's a smart guy. I was like, how do you qualify that, dude? I don't understand you. But this is the standard thinking in critical race theory. It's about, I mean, Kimberly Crenshaw, who kind of founded it back in the 80s and 90s, I believe, she said that, as an example, we should engage in intersectional thinking and critically analyze that through systems of power and privilege. So basically, in her words, if a Black woman has a trouble in a high school or whatever, we shouldn't recognize that in isolation as a problem that she has personally, but as the intersection between her being Black, her being a woman, and her being in that kind of environment, which may or may not, in her words, perpetuate white supremacy. So they were reducing everyone's individual, it's crazy, everyone's individual experiences to a bout of historical circumstances that may or may not be affecting them in the real world. So wrapping up here, because I know I've been talking for a very long time, I eventually just decided that I was going to stay with the team, but I was going to show in a manner that is vivaciously and uniquely and authentically me. I'm not going to be anyone's story to write. I'm going to write my own story. So one person on the team, we were in Illinois, and this person was a little bit belligerent with me, a little bit aggressive with me in circumstances that were not related to debate or politics. And they took this because of their critical race theory beliefs. They took me kind of defending myself in a polite way, a stern way, but a polite way, as me viewing them as a woman. They're non-binary. Me viewing them as a woman and therefore being misogynistic to them and erasing their identities. And that caused the entire team. I'm like, well, hold on. I have used your pronouns. I have respected you as a human being, but you conceive, A, that I see you as a woman because I am kind of pushing back when you interrupt my conversation with the people, and B, you're assuming that I hate women. So you're making two flawed assumptions that don't stand up to scrutiny, and you're using them and you're running with them and you're crying and you're making the entire team, except one person, delve into your delusion. But of course, I try to be agreeable. I try to apologize. But this is how they think. This is genuinely how they think. And so there came a point in time where the coach stopped scheduling me for tournaments. Me and my partner. My partner was also, she was from Nepal. She actually knows what it was like to be poor and oppressed. I mean, over there. And she is as conservative as they come. She loves America and everything. She loves liberty. And seriously, and I'm like, well, you would not, I would not conceptualize you as having these beliefs if I believed in these massive leftist ideas. If I believed in these collectivistic ideas, I wouldn't conceptualize you having these beliefs. And they basically stopped scheduling us. And they claim, oh, it was not for discrimination or anything. But when we left the room that day after they stopped scheduling us, because she walked out crying and I was a little bit sad as well, everyone in the team, even the coaches, were like, we don't want Christian back. We don't want him 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 back. And you know why? Because a few weeks before that moment, I run a student organization on my campus. I hosted a social justice debate, a debate between two academics in an academic setting who have different views on social justice. In fact, your viewers can go watch it up on YouTube. I'll be sure to send you a link if they ever want to watch. I hosted that debate. I organized it and everything. And the debate team being composed of so many leftists didn't want to hear that. They didn't want to talk about that. They didn't want, and they all of them were there. And when, after the event ended, I said, "You guys like the event?" She's like, I mean, he was saying some offensive stuff, Christian. And the professor about social justice, he basically said that, African Americans commit a lot of crimes, and that could be an explainer for social for the social inequalities, as opposed to talking about social justice. And that's a fine. I mean, that's a fine claim. I mean, there is a disparate committing of crimes amongst African Americans. It's not racist to say that. I mean, it happens. It's a statistical fact. It's an empirical fact. But they lambasted him for saying that, and they looped me in to what he said, and they used that to attack me personally. So, all in all, critical race theory has done more than just been a abstract academic practice. This has been a very grueling, a very painful notion, a very painful ideology, which has deprived me of an activity that I love and has consumed collegiate debate as a whole into this sort of miasma, this nexus of incoherent babble. And so it's unfortunate, and its consequences are matriculating beyond college campuses, unfortunately.